I thought marriage was built on trust, until the night I sat beside my son's ICU bed, watching the monitor beep, and realized my husband wasn't answering my calls. He said he was traveling for business, but then a stranger sent me a video. Ethan, champagne in hand, surrounded by flashing lights in Miami. My world cracked in an instant. Grief turned to fury, but I didn't scream. Instead, I booked the first flight out. Because if betrayal was a game, I wasn't going to lose by crying. Silence, I decided, would be my sharpest weapon. I always thought I was the kind of woman who had it all figured out. From the outside, my life looked picture perfect. I was 34, living in a suburban home painted soft beige with a white picket fence that gleamed whenever the sun hit it. Every holiday card featured Ethan, my husband, in his tailored suits, me in a pastel dress, and our son Ryan between us, smiling like the world was nothing but gentle. My friends scrolled through my posts and sent messages like, "couple goals," or "you're living the dream." I let them believe it. I let myself believe it. Ethan was always described as a man with ambition. His colleagues admired him, his mother adored him, and his sister constantly praised his sacrifices. To the world, he was the husband every woman wanted and the father every child deserved. And to me, at least back then, he was the man who had promised me forever. On a quiet evening, while Ryan played with his toy cars at my feet, I uploaded a photo, the three of us at last summer's lake trip. Ryan, cheeks pink from too much sun, Ethan with his arm loosely around my shoulders, me laughing in mid-motion. The likes came fast, the comments even faster. Perfect family. So beautiful. Never change. For a fleeting second, I basked in that illusion. Then it appeared. One comment buried beneath the sea of compliments. Anonymous profile. No picture. Just words that made my stomach tighten. "He's not where you think he is." I froze, staring at it until Ryan tugged my sleeve. I managed to smile, but my pulse raced. My first thought was spam, some troll. But why did it feel so specific? Why did it echo in my head long after I closed the app? The next morning, my world shifted. Ryan woke with a fever, his tiny body burning against my palm. Hours later, we were in the hospital, machines surrounding him, the steady beep of the monitor filling every second with dread. The doctor said it was serious, that he needed close monitoring in the ICU. I called Ethan, desperate for comfort. Straight to voicemail. I tried again and again. Finally, a text came. "In a meeting. Can't talk. I'll call when I can." I told myself not to panic. He was traveling for work. He couldn't just drop everything. That's what I whispered as I held Ryan's hand through the metal rails of his bed. But in the corner of my mind, the anonymous words replayed. "He's not where you think he is." Hours bled into a day, and the silence from Ethan grew heavier. My mother-in-law stopped by, her lips tight, her eyes scanning the hospital room as though she were checking for dust. "Ethan is working hard for this family," she said. "You shouldn't guilt him for not sitting around here." I wanted to scream, but instead I nodded. I had learned long ago that resistance only gave her more ammunition. While Ryan slept, I scrolled Ethan's social media, something I rarely did. His professional page showed snapshots of meetings, captions about deals closing, motivational quotes about leadership, but the timestamps didn't match what he'd told me. A picture supposedly from New York was tagged in Miami. The hotel lobby behind him didn't belong to the chain he claimed to stay at. The inconsistencies piled higher until they formed a wall of doubt I couldn't climb over. Late that night, as I sat in the harsh glow of the ICU monitors, my phone buzzed with a notification. A message from a friend I hadn't spoken to in months. "Is this Ethan?" Attached was a short video from TikTok. My heart thudded as I pressed play. There he was, Ethan, my Ethan. In a dimly lit club, neon lights flashing, champagne bottle in hand. He was laughing, shouting over the music, surrounded by women I'd never seen before, their hands draped casually over his shoulders as though they belonged there. The caption read, "Miami never sleeps." The sound of Ryan's monitor beeped louder in that moment, each note puncturing me like a needle. I stared at the screen until my hands trembled. The man who told me he was in a meeting, the man who said he was working hard for us, the man I had built my life around, and he was in Miami, celebrating, while our son lay fighting for his life. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the sterile hospital room, but I didn't. Instead, I saved the video. I played it again, watching the curve of Ethan's grin, the careless tilt of his head. Every second carved another crack into the illusion I had built. My entire marriage, my entire identity as his wife, felt like a photograph catching fire, perfect on the surface but fragile, ready to turn to ash the moment heat touched it. And now, the flames were spreading. The hospital walls had a way of shrinking in on me, their pale colors suffocating, their antiseptic smell cutting through every thought. I sat by Ryan's bed, my hand on his small fingers, willing my warmth into him. The rhythmic beep of the monitor was my only anchor, though every sound was a reminder of how fragile his breaths were. People came in and out, nurses checking his vitals, doctors speaking in hushed tones, but the question always circled back to the same one, whispered by acquaintances, voiced directly by relatives. Where is Ethan? I never had the answer. When my mother-in-law appeared, dressed sharply as though she were on her way to brunch, her eyes swept the room with distaste. "You're making too much of this," she said flatly, standing at the foot of the bed. "Ethan has responsibilities, deals to close. He's not a man who can sit by a bed all day like some housewife. He provides, Lauren. Don't twist it." Her words pierced deeper than the cold tile beneath my feet. I wanted to shout that our child was lying there with tubes in his arms, that providing was meaningless if you abandoned your family in its most desperate moment. But I swallowed the words. Silence felt heavier, but it was safer. Later that evening, a young nurse came in with a clipboard. She smiled apologetically as she adjusted the IV line. "I'm sorry," she murmured, almost as if she hadn't meant to speak aloud, but the payment didn't go through on the last charge. The card was declined. My head snapped up. "What do you mean?" She blinked, realizing she had said too much. "Oh, I thought you knew. It's probably just a mix-up, insurance or something. Don't worry, we'll figure it out." She left quickly, but the words stayed, echoing louder than the machines around me. Declined. Ethan had promised me that Ryan's medical fund was untouchable. Every bonus, every savings plan. We had agreed it was all for emergencies like this. And now, when we needed it most, it was gone. I waited until the room was quiet, the faint light of monitors glowing against Ryan's pale face. With trembling fingers, I logged into our joint accounts. The numbers glared back at me. Balances nearly zeroed out. Large transfers to unfamiliar accounts, transactions from luxury hotels and high-end clubs. My chest tightened until breathing became a deliberate act. He had drained us. Not just the hospital fund, everything. Our savings, our safety net, our trust. It wasn't just betrayal. It was abandonment dressed in numbers. Every dollar stolen proof that he had chosen champagne over his son's heartbeat. For the first time in days, my tears dried. The pain didn't lessen, but it shifted, hardening into something sharp. I wasn't powerless. If Ethan thought silence meant weakness, he was wrong. Silence could be a weapon, and I was ready to use it. I packed a small bag when no one was watching. Clothes, my passport, the essentials. I booked the earliest flight to Miami, not giving myself time to reconsider. Every move I made felt mechanical, like I had stepped outside my own body, letting determination guide me. At the airport, I moved through crowds in a blur. Families laughed over fast food, businessmen typed furiously on laptops, children ran to catch planes. I carried none of that ease. All I had was the image of Ethan's smile in that video and the sound of Ryan's monitor in my ears. On the plane, I sat by the window, the city lights shrinking beneath me as we lifted into the night sky. I imagined Ethan's surprise when I walked in. I imagined the look on his face when I confronted him with evidence of what he'd done. Rage swirled inside me, but beneath it was something colder, a strategy forming, step by step. Halfway through the flight, my phone buzzed. A new message lit the screen. No contact name, no photo, just words. When you arrive, don't scream. Just watch. I stared at it, my heart thundering. Someone knew. Someone was waiting. I didn't know if it was a warning, a threat, or a lifeline. But I tightened my grip on the phone, closed my eyes, and whispered to myself the promise that had become my armor. I won't scream. I'll watch. And when the time comes, I'll strike. Miami was a different world. Heat pressing against my skin, music vibrating from streets that never seemed to sleep, neon lights promising indulgence at every corner. The cab dropped me in front of a glass tower that stretched into the night sky. The hotel name glittered in gold, the kind of place you didn't check into unless you wanted the world to know you had money to burn. Ethan's money, my money, Ryan's money. I straightened my dress in the reflection of the sliding doors and walked in as though I belonged there. My heart hammered, but my face remained calm. If betrayal was a stage, I had to play my role to perfection. The penthouse was already alive when I arrived. Music pulsed through the air, bass rattling the glass windows that overlooked the ocean. Women in sequined dresses laughed as they poured champagne, men clinked glasses, and in the middle of it all was Ethan, my husband, my betrayer. He wore a crisp shirt, sleeves rolled just enough to show off his watch. Around him, girls draped themselves like accessories, laughing at jokes that weren't funny. I pulled out my phone, hands steady now, and began recording. Every detail, every false smile, every careless laugh. But then I noticed something worse. A camera, not mine, was already aimed at him. Ethan was live streaming on his phone, speaking loudly over the music, delivering what sounded like a motivational speech. "Success isn't luck, it's discipline," he shouted, grinning into the lens. "You have to hustle, invest, and believe in yourself. That's how I built this life." Thousands of people were watching him at that very moment, admiring the illusion of a man who claimed to sacrifice everything for his family. He wasn't just lying to me, he was lying to the world, and the world was applauding him for it. Rage surged so strong I nearly broke my silence, but I pressed my lips together, recording, observing, saving the truth for the moment it would matter most. As the party raged, I slipped away. The hallway outside the suite was quieter, lined with marble floors and expensive art. I found the main bedroom, and there it was, his laptop carelessly left open on the desk. The screen glowed with numbers and charts. Curiosity and fury guided my hands. I sat down, the leather chair cold against my back, and clicked through the files. What I found hollowed me out. Transfers from our joint accounts, routed through offshore banks, documents showing withdrawals disguised as investments, cryptocurrency wallets filled with tokens I'd never heard of, their graphs plunging red. He hadn't just wasted our savings on luxury. He'd gambled Ryan's hospital fund on coins that crashed overnight. And worse, I recognized company names. Ethan hadn't only stolen from us, he had stolen from his firm, his partners, everyone who trusted him. Each file was another blade twisting deeper, each number proof that the man I had married wasn't careless, but calculated. He had built his empire of lies brick by brick, smiling while he did it. The sound of laughter from the party drifted through the door, muffled but mocking. I copied as much as I could onto a flash drive I carried for work. Every click echoed in the silence, sweat prickling my forehead as though the walls themselves knew I didn't belong there. Then I heard it. The front door clicking shut, footsteps, heavy, deliberate, coming closer. I froze. The laptop still open before me, a damning screen filled with transactions glowing like evidence in a courtroom. My pulse thundered so loud I thought it would give me away. The door to the bedroom opened. Ethan stood there, framed by the light from the hallway, his shirt unbuttoned now, his face flushed with alcohol and victory. For a second, he didn't see me. Then his eyes landed on the desk. On me, on the screen. The smile drained from his face. "What the hell are you doing here, Lauren?" he asked, his voice cutting through the room like glass shattering. My fingers tightened around the flash drive, still warm from the port. My heart pounded, but I met his stare. This was no longer a marriage. This was war. The confrontation in the penthouse was just the beginning. By the time I returned home, Ethan and his family had already spun their version of events. To them, I wasn't a mother who had uncovered betrayal. I was an unstable wife, desperate to drag down a successful man. Their narrative spread quickly. Ethan's sister posted cryptic comments online. Some people will say anything when they're jealous of success. His mother, always poised and sharp-tongued, whispered to neighbors and relatives that I had fabricated everything. Soon enough, their lawyer reached out with papers. They were preparing to sue me for defamation and, worse, to challenge my fitness as a mother. The weight of it pressed on me like concrete. I spent sleepless nights in Ryan's hospital room, one hand resting on his blanket, the other scrolling through accusations plastered online. Strangers, convinced by Ethan's polished speeches and curated life, called me bitter, a liar, an attention seeker. The humiliation was suffocating. But then I remembered the video, Ethan champagne in hand, women leaning into him, neon lights flashing behind his smug grin. The truth had been staring at me the whole time. He wasn't careful enough to hide it from the world. He had flaunted it. All I had to do was show people what I had seen. I uploaded the video with no caption, no explanation. Just Ethan laughing and pouring champagne as though nothing in the world mattered. Within hours, it spread like wildfire. The same strangers who once accused me now turned on him. Comments poured in. Wasn't his son in the hospital? This man is a fraud. All that talk about family values, and this is who he really is? News outlets picked it up. Headlines ran with the hypocrisy of a so-called family man celebrating while his child fought for life. The tide shifted. Where there had been isolation, there was now outrage, directed at Ethan. Still, outrage alone wasn't enough. Ethan was a master manipulator, and I knew he would try to twist the story back in his favor. That's when I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Claire, a college friend who had become an investigative journalist. We met in a quiet cafe near the hospital. Her eyes widened as I slid the flash drive across the table. "What's on it?" she asked. "Everything," I said. "Transactions, offshore accounts, stolen funds. He didn't just betray me, he betrayed his company, his clients. And I think your paper might want to see how deep this goes." Claire studied me for a long moment before nodding. "If this is real, Lauren, you're not just taking down your husband. You're taking down everyone who protected him." And she was right, because buried in those files was more than Ethan's recklessness. There were names I recognized. His mother's charity, his brother-in-law's consulting firm, money funneled through accounts that looked suspiciously like shells. The betrayal stretched wider than I had imagined. Within a week, Claire's exposé dropped. It was meticulous, damning, impossible to ignore. Ethan wasn't just a negligent husband. He was a fraud, a thief, a man whose empire was built on lies. And his family? Complicit. The respectable facade they had cultivated for decades crumbled under the weight of public scrutiny. The fallout was immediate. Ethan's company suspended him, investors pulled out, and clients demanded answers. His family, once so eager to call me delusional, scrambled to protect themselves. But there was no protection left. Their fingerprints were on too many dirty accounts, too many charities that were little more than laundromats for stolen funds. The final blow came when his mother collapsed at a press conference, cameras capturing every second. The woman who had once looked down on me from every angle was now reduced to a frail figure, paramedics lifting her onto a stretcher as reporters shouted questions. I watched the news clip from the hospital waiting room, Ryan still asleep beside me. My hands shook, not from fear this time, but from the sheer force of what had just happened. I hadn't just exposed Ethan. I had dismantled the dynasty that had tried to crush me. The phone rang. It was Ethan. His voice, once smooth and commanding, cracked with desperation. "Lauren, listen to me. We can fix this. You don't understand what you've done." But I did understand. For the first time, I saw clearly. The phoenix rises not because it chooses to burn, but because it has no other choice. I had been forced into the fire, and now I was rising from the ashes, stronger, sharper, unbreakable. What Ethan didn't realize was that this was only the beginning. Victory, I learned, is never clean. The moment Claire's article dropped and Ethan's empire cracked, I thought I could finally breathe. But power never surrenders quietly. Ethan knew he was losing in the court of public opinion, so he retreated to the only battlefield where appearances could still protect him, the legal system. The summons came swiftly. Ethan was suing me for defamation, demanding damages, and worse, petitioning for full custody of Ryan. He painted himself as the stable parent, the provider, while I was cast as unstable, manipulative, unfit. His family rallied behind him, each ready to swear under oath that I had always been irresponsible, that I was exaggerating Ryan's illness for sympathy. The tabloids ran with it. Headlines screamed about the wife who tried to destroy her husband. Old photos of me, tired, disheveled, clutching Ryan in hospital corridors, were plastered online beside images of Ethan in crisp suits, framed by microphones and cameras. They turned me into a caricature of bitterness, while he postured as the wronged visionary. I wanted to crawl back into silence to protect Ryan from the circus, but I knew if I didn't fight, Ethan would take him from me. The thought of my son in Ethan's hands, raised under lies and neglect, was unbearable. So I went to court, armed with nothing but truth and a lawyer who believed in me. The courtroom was cold, every eye watching, judging. Ethan sat across from me, immaculate in his navy suit, his smile a carefully rehearsed mask. His mother clutched his arm, frail but determined to glare at me with every ounce of her strength. His sister whispered to the attorney, feeding him stories I knew they would twist into evidence. They spoke first. The lawyer painted a picture of me as a bitter wife trying to tear down her successful husband, using our child's illness as leverage. Witnesses, his own family, testified that I had always been dramatic, exaggerating problems, creating chaos. Each word was a dagger, each lie a weight, pressing down on me. When it was my turn, my lawyer stood. He had waited, silent, letting them bury themselves in their narrative. Then he walked to the center of the room and said only this: "Actions speak louder than words. Let's see the truth." He played the footage. On the screen, the courtroom watched Ethan at the hospital. Surveillance cameras captured the exact night Ryan was admitted. There was Ethan in the lobby, phone pressed to his ear, glancing at his watch impatiently. Then, instead of heading toward the ICU, he turned and walked out. Hours later, another camera caught him boarding a flight. The next clip silenced the room entirely. Ethan in Miami, the same night, laughing in the club, champagne exploding in his hands. The timestamps aligned perfectly with Ryan's first night in intensive care. Gasps filled the air. Even the judge leaned forward, her expression hardening. Ethan shifted in his seat, his face pale beneath the courtroom lights. His lawyer stammered, tried to object, but it was too late. The evidence spoke louder than every testimony, louder than every carefully crafted lie. In that moment, I felt the scales of justice tilt. I wasn't just a mother begging for credibility. I was a woman armed with undeniable proof. The verdict came days later. Ethan's lawsuit was dismissed. I retained full custody of Ryan. The court admonished Ethan for his neglect, his credibility shredded before the same audience he had tried to manipulate. I had won. On paper, in public, in law, I had won. But victory, I learned again, has its price. Ryan still lay in the hospital, his progress slow, uncertain. Every day I sat by his bed, whispering stories, praying for him to squeeze my hand just a little tighter. The weight of the trial lingered, heavy as smoke in my lungs. And the family I once married into, the family I had tried so hard to please, was gone. Not gone as in absent, but gone as in scorched earth. There would be no reconciliation, no polite holiday dinners, no civility. Whatever bridge had once existed between us had been reduced to ash. One evening, as I packed away court documents, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Ethan. My stomach tightened as I opened it. "You won today, but you destroyed us all." I stared at the words, my chest hollow. He wasn't wrong. I had destroyed something, but it wasn't my fault. It was his. He had built everything on lies, and I had only pulled the veil away. Still, destruction is destruction, and the silence that followed his message pressed down on me heavier than all the noise before it. When the dust settled, silence became my sanctuary. Reporters camped outside the hospital and later outside my home, their cameras flashing whenever I stepped out, their voices shouting questions about Ethan, about the trial, about the scandal that had consumed our lives. I ignored them all. For the first time in months, I chose not to fight back, not to defend myself, not to feed the fire. I understood something Ethan never would. Not every battle is fought in public. Some wars are won by walking away. I turned down interviews, book deals, and offers to appear on talk shows. I declined television specials that promised me control over my narrative. They wanted my tears, my outrage, my breakdown on camera, but I refused to become another spectacle. The truth was already out there. I didn't need to repeat it for entertainment. Instead, I poured myself into something else. Something bigger than Ethan, bigger than his family, bigger than the ashes of the life I once clung to. I created a foundation in Ryan's name, a fund for children who needed emergency care, for parents who had to choose between saving their child and paying their bills. I started small, with what little I had left, and reached out quietly to a handful of friends I trusted. But the world was watching, whether I wanted it or not. News of the foundation spread across social media. People who had seen Ethan's downfall now saw me channeling pain into purpose. Donations poured in from strangers. Messages from parents who had faced similar nightmares filled my inbox. What began as a modest initiative grew overnight into a national movement. The irony wasn't lost on me. Ethan had used social media to build his illusion, and I was now using it to build something real. Clips of me speaking about the foundation, sometimes just a few words recorded in hospital corridors, went viral. Hashtags trended. Schools, churches, and even corporations reached out to collaborate. The foundation was no longer mine alone. It belonged to every family who had been ignored, every mother who had cried beside a hospital bed. It was then I realized I had broken the cycle. Ethan and his family thrived on control, manipulation, reputation. They wanted me silenced, isolated, erased. By refusing to play their game, by creating something of my own, I had rewritten the script. As for Ethan, he vanished. His name became poison in business circles, his accounts frozen, his partners abandoning him. The once polished figure who preached discipline and sacrifice was reduced to whispers of scandal and fraud. Occasionally, I heard rumors, sightings of him in cheap motels, desperate attempts to launch new schemes under fake names. But none of them lasted. The world had turned its back on him, and in that darkness, he was alone. I didn't feel triumph, not anymore. Watching him crumble brought no joy, only a muted sense of closure. He had chosen his path. I had chosen mine. The true victory was Ryan. Weeks after the verdict, after endless nights of uncertainty, I walked into his hospital room to find his eyes open, clear and bright in the morning light. He blinked at me, then smiled, weak, crooked, but real. My knees buckled as tears blurred my vision. For the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself cry openly, not from fear or anger, but from gratitude. I leaned close, brushing his hair back, whispering, "You're still here. We're still here." That night, I sat at my desk while Ryan slept peacefully nearby. My laptop screen glowed with messages from across the country. Families thanking me, volunteers offering help, stories of children saved because of the foundation. I opened a blank post and stared at the cursor. What could I possibly say after everything? How do you capture months of betrayal, loss, survival, and rebirth in a few words? Finally, I typed, "This is not revenge. This is rebirth." I hit post. The word spread instantly, carried by thousands of shares, millions of eyes. But I didn't stay to watch. I closed the laptop, turned to Ryan, and held his hand. The world could interpret my words however it wanted. Some would call it victory, others a lesson. For me, it was simply the truth. I had been broken down to nothing, and from that nothing I had risen. The cycle of silence, betrayal, and manipulation had ended. A new order had begun, not one built on illusions, but on resilience, on love, on the quiet strength of a woman who refused to be erased. And as I sat in that quiet room, my son breathing steadily beside me, I knew this was not the end of our story. It was only the beginning.